Hey there, friends. Welcome to Hawkeye Speaks. Today, we're going to be discussing holistic management, debunking holistic management, and talking about how cows cause climate change. All right? Because, of course, this guy, Allan Savory, must be a complete nut job, right? My goodness. Where does he get off thinking that desertification is the number one issue relating to the health of our planet and ecosystem management, and that the use of ruminant animals as herds could possibly reverse desertification on a large scale, and in fact is our only tool for doing such? Man, where does this guy get off? I'm telling you. Everybody knows that cows cause climate change, and that we should never ever eat red meat, and that we should never ever use cattle as herds, as nature designed the system to work. Well, of course I'm joking, I'm being facetious, friends. What we're going to talk about is, though, why holistic management doesn't work in a more serious way. And I'll get right into it and say that the reason why holistic management doesn't work is because people don't work it. It's one of those kind of things. It works if you work it. And if you don't do it, it don't work. So what is it? What's holistic management all about? It fascinates me to see that many people that are involved in ranching still seem to view Allan Savory's work as it was designed in the early 70s, basically before he even wrote the book, that he came up with this wagon wheel system, which was rotational grazing. But these days, hopefully everyone knows that the term rotational grazing has fallen out of fashion for a good reason. And nowadays we're more inclined, I hope, to use the term adaptive grazing, which means that we're going to adapt to the needs of the environment through the use of the tool of observation. And when it comes to how we actually work with ruminants, there is no set protocol. There's no rules of exactly what you should do. The book Holistic Management does have some protocols, though. And what those protocols are is that we come together in groups of human beings, people that live in a common area, a geographical zone, or I mean, if we're conceptualizing and just talking about this stuff, you don't have to live in the same area. But if we're actually getting ready to implement solutions, a group comes together and then identifies their shared common values, which we essentially all have. It's really even hard to find anyone that disagrees with a set of shared common values, such as, I would like to have clean air to breathe and good clean water to drink. I would like to see water that flows in the streams year-round, consistently. And I would like to have a place where I can go on living and prospering, but my children and our children's children can go on living and prospering. A healthy environment. And yeah, that's really something that it's kind of even hard to find anyone that will disagree with those core values, shared common values. So next from that, this is really the only protocols, the set protocol that comes out of holistic management, is that once we form a group and we identify shared common values, and this is an important step, because if we don't identify those basic shared common values, we may just be participating under the default of this greater society at large that's marching off the cliff, which basically has its core value as money. Make money above all else at all costs. And sometimes that's referred to as capitalism, but it's being a capitalist may actually be the solution, but that's another matter that we have to unpack. Okay, but anyway, Allan Savory's system and Jody Butterfield, his wife, wonderful book that they wrote. And I'm not sure what's up with her. If it does certainly, I haven't heard about her in years, but but she was involved. Her name is on the title of the book, and I have to imagine that she did have some input in creating this system. But in any case, the next step is that we form a holistic goal. And a holistic goal, the difference between a goal and a holistic goal is that the holistic goal is going to be all-encompassing in a way. It's a bit larger. It's not thinking 5 minutes or 5 seconds into the future. It's thinking 5 years and 50 years into the future. And in that way, it aligns with the shared common value statement. Okay, the holistic goal should be basically a way that we're going to achieve our shared common values. Okay, so our holistic goal may be that we would like to see more ecosystem diversity and resilience in this plot of land right out here in front of us, or that we're working with. Okay, and then we're going to ask, well, how do we achieve that? And now the thing about the system of holistic management is that from this point on, as I'm identifying, there are no set protocols. What we do, and this for me was very important to understand, because I'm a plan and idea person, and a lot of the plans and ideas are great. But the thing about it is that we're going to put the plans and ideas in the back seat, and we're going to put the goals in the front seat. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a set of testing protocols, procedures, to identify which of the plans and ideas might actually best achieve the goals. So one of the things that I came to start saying after understanding this, integrating this system into my own thinking, is that the plans and ideas are like the trees, and everybody's got their own tree, and they like to swing it around at each other compared to seeing the forest as a whole. So step back from your individual tree, if you'll allow me to describe it in that way, and let's have a look at the forest. That's what it's all about. And again, beyond that, there are no set protocols within the system of holistic management. But back to the beginning, the reason why holistic management doesn't work, and it can't work, is that people don't work it. They're not following the system. I came up with this funny saying years ago about New Mexico. Why does holistic management not work in New Mexico? Is because holistic management ain't working in New Mexico. It's just a roundabout funny thing that, it's not an individual thing, an individualized concept. It's something that we do as a whole within groups. We form groups, identify our shared common values, we set holistic goals, and then we put all the plans and ideas through a set of testing protocols to see what will best achieve that goal or those goals. So, and how about cattle? Well, cattle do cause climate change, okay? Because here's the thing, if you yourself were to change your diet and eat only grass-fed meat once a day, fatty meat, good healthy cattle, if you were to eat only nothing else but cattle, the climate is going to change. Your health will vastly improve. Your mental clarity will improve 1,000%, and the environment will begin to change around you as well. Because actually, the problem with cattle is management. Cows on their own, they're just an animal. They're just a ruminant animal that eats grass, and they can be used in a way that's destructive or beneficial to the environment, just as with any and every single tool that we have at our disposal. Anything that we do can be either a benefit or a detriment to environments. So, the thing about holistic management and using ruminant animals as herds is that nature designed this system long before human populations began to explode upon the earth. Ruminant animals have the rumen, which is the first stomach, which is packed full of microbes that are able to digest not lignin. What's the precursor to lignin is I'm forgetting the word right now. I'll remember it in a second. But cellulose, okay? We don't digest cellulose in our guts. It requires a ruminant animal, which is which is part of how the world ecosystems are maintained. Because without cellulose, which then does form into lignin, this is how plants gain the ability to grow up off of the ground. And this is how we get everything from grasses to forests. And I think that we could all unanimously agree that this is a good thing. That if we didn't have cellulose and lignous materials, that we wouldn't have any healthy ecosystems at all, really, as we understand them. Because, once again, this is what gives plants the ability to grow up from the surface of the earth. So what takes them down? Well, fungus can decompose, but that requires death first. And that's a bit morbid if we have to have everything die first. But there's also a big problem in that, and this is what Allan Savory has focused on for many years, which is oxidation. And if you happen to study the Gaia theory, not in some idealized way, but actually as Lovelock and Margles described it, we would find that it is one of the absolute core tenets of that theory, is that it is life itself that regulates the oxidation state. And studying redox chemistry is in fact quite fascinating, and I would wager to say that redox basically is life, the balance between reduced and oxidized. And I'm not a chemist, I won't go into too far into any details of how exactly that works, but I recommend checking it out. I took a course through John Kemp's Regen Academy on redox chemistry with Olivier Husson, and that was a game changer for me, in that I realized after taking that course that the function of soil on the surface of the earth is to mitigate all energy fluctuations. That soil is the clothing of the earth. And if any of you have watched my talks about soil health already, you will have heard me say this, that soil is the clothing of the earth. It is what mitigates and manages all energy fluctuations that we experience on a daily basis, which is all of them. All energy inputs fluctuate continuously. And what manages that is this clothing. Okay? And the result of that is ecological stability. And if we get into the climate situation, we would see that, of course, obviously we don't have any significant warming going on, because it gets equally, in fact, probably quite a bit more cold than it does hot, which is indicative of instability. All right. And instability, it's a big deal. I mean, we experience it right here where I live on this high mesa. 50-degree fluctuation from day to night, and then from day to day as well. Where yesterday morning it was 50 degrees, and then the winds come in and it drops down to 30 degrees, and then at night it's 10 degrees. And then this morning it's a bit windy, so it's 20 degrees. And then if it comes down, the sun comes out, it's going to go up to 50 degrees and 60 degrees in the sun. It's wildly fluctuating. Okay, and that's what we kind of need to envision when we're thinking about climate stability. All right, and then back to the situation with ruminant animals. The real deal, as Savory described in his book, and that we should all understand, is that all of the herblands, grasslands, and prairie lands of the world, this is a generalization, but I believe it's relatively true, that all of the herblands, grasslands, and prairie lands of the world were built and maintained by the herd and predator system. The herd, the ruminant animals bunch together as a herd, and then they move along because of predation, a predator. And they stay bunched for their safety, and they move because of the threat of a predator, but also when they're bunched together, they are going to eat the forage evenly, and they're going to dung and urinate evenly, and then it's going to be time to move on naturally. It's a perfect system created by nature. So the whole idea with holistic management is that we could replicate that as the managers ourselves, taking on the role of the predator. And the thing about it is, if any of you happen to see Savory's debate with this guy George Monbiot, which is rather depressing to watch, but it's revealing also in that this guy demands Where's the peer-reviewed scientific papers that prove that this will work? Well, what that really proves is that gentleman's ignorance. Because as Savory says, and as that any of us should and could know, well, we don't have multiple Earths to put into the laboratory and reduce to fit within the confines of our scientific method. But we have one Earth, and it's actually pretty big. And what happens is that, when we're working with living systems, we need to use epidemiological studies and anecdotal evidence as the proof. There is no need to even try to reduce it down to a peer-reviewed paper, because, as I say, that only proves your own ignorance if that's the direction that you're looking in. And I have talked a little bit about, jump into a different topic, like this building that I'm in right now, this Earthship. Earthships, do we need to reduce it to a scientific experiment to prove that they work? Or is it proof enough that everyone who worked for Mike Reynolds went on to build their own? And that I'm sitting in one right now, that my heating and cooling costs are essentially $0 per year. And that's a big difference from zero to some people that pay $150, $200 in energy costs. However you want to equate that into the BTU production that's necessary and the cooling energy that's necessary to maintain just the stable living conditions in their home, whereas I have to do next to nothing to have a comfortable home to live in. And all we have to do is walk into one yourself and you'll experience it. But once again, to say that we have to reduce that to a peer-reviewed scientific paper, it only proves your own ignorance, and that's something that Michael Levin says about investigating the intelligence of organisms. It's like, where do you draw the line? And he has that basically uses that exact statement, which is that, and I don't remember the quote, but to say, any measurement of where intelligence begins and ends in organisms is just a measure of your own intelligence. And I like to say that about consciousness, that wherever you draw the line of where consciousness starts or stops, that just proves where your intellect starts and stops, because it's actually much more broad than we can reduce into some, confined definition. So let's open our minds a little bit, friends, all right? And let's debunk holistic management by talking about the real truths, which is that holistic management is not going to work if we're not working it. If we don't come together in groups and define our shared common values, set goals, and then accurately prescribe plans and ideas that will reach those goals. So the situation is that some people are learning about holistic management and adaptive grazing. The term adaptive grazing is in that kind of part of the field is catching on, I would say, more than Savory's work. He's kind of falling into obscurity to some degree, which is unfortunate, but these things happen. But I'm going to have to say to y'all that also what happens is that people grow old and die. I mean, you have to step back and look at the larger trajectory of what's going on. And even though we have an absolute explosion of carnivore doctors and health practitioners that are speaking about the benefits of eating grass-fed meats and the need to reduce carbohydrate load, and please go in and check it out yourself about how we get high deuterium levels and how you get it's a lot of it is centered around that deuterium buildup, okay, which is a heavy isotope of hydrogen that is influenced by carbohydrates, but also it's said to be out of season fruits and vegetables, and there's many factors that play into that, and we're not particularly discussing the personal diet, health, and wellness stuff right now. We're talking about healing the land, okay? But even though there's an explosion of carnivore health practitioners out there, we're not seeing any explosion of adaptive grazing knowledge being spread around in the community. What you'll see on average, again, following the trajectories, is we still see these same kind of narratives around overpopulation and the patriarchy and the capitalism and this kind of stuff getting blamed for people's problems in their lives. And yeah, I think it's really important to step back and look at those trajectories and see that we're not going anywhere at this point, friends. It ain't getting anywhere at all unless we see some mass movement happening. You know, for myself personally, I'm an independent thinker and an interdisciplinary researcher, and I hear a lot of people talking about the need for interdisciplinary studies and, you know, holistic thinkers that are broad ranging. But let me tell you, it ain't pretty to go down this road, because still, I mean, the difference, the opposite of an interdisciplinary research is a specialist, you know, and the specialists, it's valued. There is value in becoming a specialist and becoming an expert in your own field. But if we, again, step back and look at the larger trajectory, I would have to tell you that it ain't easy to become an interdisciplinary researcher or a practitioner. There's no jobs available. There's no even really respect to be gained from within the community. What I get a lot of times, people will tell me, "Oh, you're very well read," and I feel like a lot of times people say that because they feel offended by all the information that I'm sharing and all these around different subjects, and that's still, you know, there's still this perception that you don't have anything to offer society unless you're a specialist. And again, what I'm saying is, I don't think there's much of any jobs to be obtained unless you are a specialist. So where is the support for people that understand this stuff and that are enthusiastic about it? Unfortunately, again, I mean, I have seen people come and go quite literally from this life before they were able to effectively share their enthusiasm around this stuff. And that is sad to see, that holistic management and adaptive grazing, not only does it work, you know, that it's proven to be effective, just as I'm saying, I'm sitting in a building right here that requires $0 heating and cooling. The system is completely proven to be effective. Even though it's not catching on the way that it needs to. So here next week, Ray Archuleta and Alejandro Carrillo are coming to Taos again. That's wonderful. I don't know if Carrillo's been up here yet, but Ray Archuleta's been here. And I wonder how much the soil and water guys had to pay to get them to come up here. And again, it's great that they're coming, but I would have to say, why are you guys coming to Taos? Because this is the most unlikely place on the globe to have any type of adaptive grazing practices adopted here, because we got nothing but a liberal takeover and a highway, a 16-lane highway to gentrification. That's about all that's happening around here. The amount of livestock, you know, numbers that exist around here, the usage, it's been dropping off the map in the last 25 years that I've been here. So where's the herds at? There are no herds of cattle to use. There are no ranchers that have the cattle that have any interest in listening to someone like me and working with young people with crazy ideas like, hey, we need to use those ruminants as herds and move the herd every day on average. All right. Carrillo sums it up very well. And, you know, if I can recollect properly, I would boil down his principles into 5, 6, okay? In regards to the cattle, phenotype over genotype, okay? Number 1. Number 2, build your herd, okay? Always that regards to continuous culling of misbehaviors, of bad apples out of the herd. 20 to 30% on a regular basis should be culled from the herd, okay? So those are 2 about the cattle. Let's see what else. And then is in regards to the management, take 50, leave 50%. And I would say that could actually be maybe adjusted to 2, and I will discuss this with him next week when I see him, but adjusted to 2/3. Like sometimes you only want to take 1/3 and leave 2/3 Sometimes you want to take 2/3 and leave 1/3, but it depends on the species, and you have to have some understanding of what succession looks like based on the species that we have available and present and potential in a given environment. Okay, but yeah, in general, take 50, leave 50. That's a good recipe. And then timing is everything. This is a big one. This is a principle that Carrillo discusses that is huge and simple as well. Timing is everything. Okay, and that starts with the time of day that you approach the herd to move them. He's talking about coming in at 2, 3 o'clock when they've done morning grazing and they're all relaxed, okay? And you don't want to be upsetting the cattle. You don't want them to be raising their heads up and getting anxious, okay? You learn how to work with the cattle on a daily moment-to-moment basis so that your timing works with them as animals, okay? But then stepping back from that, there's the timing of how long we leave the herd in a given, enclosure or paddock or area, okay? And then there's the timing of the year also. And in an area like I'm at here, the herd, if we had real stock density to move through an area, on average, until we get some resilience, some diversity and health built back up, where there's actually forage and many diverse species present, we really only need the herd to come through about every 1 to 3 years. Okay, so that's an average of 2 years. A herd moving through an area once every 2 years. That's about the average timing that we're looking at. Okay, but that requires the tool of observation to have someone who knows enough about succession and plant species diversity and water cycles of a local environment who can make this decision. Okay, right. And the other one, is kind of back to the ruminant, using the ruminants themselves, is stock density over stocking rates. Okay, that is the herd, how to manage as a herd. And the important thing to know about this is that we can use incredibly high stock density rates and still have the same stocking rates. Amount of animals on a certain plot of land is a different metric than how tightly bunched we use them. And the more tightly bunched, the more quickly they're going to have to be moved. All right, but we're talking about going from 1,000 pounds per acre to 1,000,000 pounds per acre of density, all right? And that is an important metric to remember. And this is, again, it's not a set protocol. And, there is plenty of information to gain and to utilize that Dr. Allan Williams talks about, that Savory talks about, Carrillo, these guys, they have a wealth of information on how to adjust those stocking rates dependent on certain conditions that we're experiencing. Okay, so that's really it right there. Those 5 principles or so. This is basically how to do it, how to use the ruminant animals as herds. And then something that Savory talks about, which is very, very, very critical, which unfortunately I don't hear as much of, at least in the public. The public has, I think, almost no idea about this factor, which is that animals behave differently. Though we could see this with human beings, we could see this. So you look at the John Calhoun rat studies about keeping mice or rats in confinement and how they behave if they have all their food and water needs met. That's a real interesting something to analogize with. But as Savory talked about, animals behave differently if they are just allowed to do their own thing. He gives the analogy of the donkey going to the well. If you have a donkey that goes to the well every single day, 365 days a year, versus if you had 365 donkeys that went to the well once, and what kind of difference are we going to see? Well, that single donkey that goes to the well once a day, it might just follow the same path every time. It might just eat selectively on the plants that it wants to eat, and it may become a bit of an unruly character, like a like a teenager that thinks they can just do whatever they want and just take a little bit here and take a little bit there and never give back. But again, it's all about the management. The ruminant themselves is a tool to be used, and it can be used destructively or beneficially to the environment. So if you imagine the donkey, 365 of them going to the well at once, that's going to have a much different impact on the land. Big difference. And then that only happens once out of every 365 days. So animals behave much differently under different management circumstances. All right. They will, and again, we got to also relate this back to these principles about building up your herd, selecting phenotype over genotype, and continuous culling of animals that are poor participators in the system, or poor bad apples, however you want to actually define that. But not all animals are up to the task of working well. So luckily, kind of the way it works with that aspect, and down in Mexico, they don't face the same hurdles as we do here around being able to just process an animal and get it to market. So what they do is they cull animals that need to be removed from the herd, and then they're utilized. They are turned into meat and product, and that benefits the community. So that brings me to another aspect of here, what's going on in Taos. We have a thing called the mobile matanza, which was a mobile kill wagon for processing livestock that was operated out of the county many years ago. And over the years that I've been here, there's been talk of trying to get it back up and running. And recently, they have made some real steps on getting it back up and running, and apparently had secured a location also for a butchering facility. And I don't have the details exact. I don't know exactly what has happened, but what I do know is that you got a bunch of people that are up in arms about it and have literally been out on the streets protesting, putting up flyers all over town saying, "Stop the Taos slaughterhouse." And they are, probably this is largely a vegan movement, but also there's people that are just concerned with their property taxes. Okay, they want to stop, they want to literally take food out of my mouth and out of the community's mouths so that they can preserve their property values. And talk about disgusting. I mean, nothing could disgust me more than this. So again, Taos is one of the areas in the world that needs this the most. This whole in fact, the entire state of New Mexico, in fact, the entire Southwest United States, and even all the way up through Nevada and into Oregon is severely desertifying environments that are facing the conditions of desertification, which is a domination of a woody species. Here it's sagebrush, and then an opening up of bare ground in between. Okay, we get a complete loss of diversity, and then we get a loss of resiliency. And then what happens is that the ground caps off so that water's not even absorbed. When we get these heavy summer rains, they hit and they just run off, and that's what causes arroyos and drainages and erosion problems. And that's a big thing to understand about what a lot of what desertification is. It's kind of like flat ground erosion. We can all know what erosion is when we see it on a hillside in a bank, is that topsoil and plant is just washed away and becomes ravines and cuts. And okay, well, this happens actually on flat ground too. But then, what happens is we get a loss of diversity and a domination of a single woody species. Sometimes there's two, which down in the south we have mesquite, and but it happens all over the world, and it moves in a trajectory towards a desert. That's what the word desertification means, is that after a while, what we're going to see is that even the one woody species will be lost, and we'll have sand dunes showing up, and then we will have wild fluctuations in temperature, and we also will have a complete loss of the system of hydrological cycling and how that is mitigated. Because as I had indicated, the role of soil is to mitigate energy fluctuations. And one of the most important types of energy is actually the water cycle. I mean, it's not considered a form of energy at all, but water is life. There's real validity in that saying to every degree that you could consider it. And balancing the water cycle, these days a lot of people use the term the small water cycle. I don't use that term because to me hydrological cycles are hydrological cycles, and to me local biology creates global ecology. So I don't really feel a need to separate it out into the small water cycle, because it's important everywhere. It's important that we anywhere that we're able to influence the health of environments, that we work towards healthy hydrological cycling, which is, it's pretty easy to understand how it works in the basic sense. But if we dig into it a little bit more, we can see that there's even really interesting things like hygroscopic bacteria that precipitate rainfall, bacteria that live on the leaves of trees and that actually go up and form clouds themselves. It's cool stuff of how it works. But another interesting thing to think about that was identified by Victor Schauberger about 100 years ago was the difference between a half hydrological cycle and a full cycle. And in the half cycle, what happens is that when we do get cloud cover and it rains, the rain comes down, and a lot of times it actually just sizzles right off the surface. It doesn't even not soak in or run off. It just gone. It evaporates because of a temperature gradient problem that the ground should always be cooler. This is what Schauberger talked about. Okay, and if the ground is warmer than the air, you're going to see that sizzling effect, and you won't even have the benefit of the hydrological cycle at all. And a full hydrological cycle, in opposition to that, is where the water comes down and it's effectively soaked into the environment, and it comes in all different levels, from the top surface layer to the layer beneath that where deeper tree roots go down into aquifers, and then back up. So it's not just, hydrological cycling is not just rainfall that comes down and then water that goes back up into clouds. It's actually the entire surface of the earth is part of that. Okay? And another quote from Lynn Margulis about this is that the surface of the earth doesn't, I forget the quote exactly. Sorry about this, okay? But the surface of the earth is not a home for life. It is life. I'll have to get that quote at another point for you, but it's a really powerful statement that the surface of the earth is alive, okay? And one of the major ways that we integrate with this is our relationship with animals, okay? So mimicking the herd and predator system, acting as nature, doing biomimicry is what Ray Archuleta is really into. How do we comprehend and copy nature? That's a quote from Schauberger. It's hard to see that it's not a beneficial thing to do if you understand it a little bit. But once again, friends, we got to back up and look at the trajectory. And still, so many people have ingrained within their thinking that eating red meat was bad for you. And even though there is now an explosion of health practitioners, we're way behind the curve with being able to actualize that in terms of management and creating. And as I was just describing, there's no butchering going on around here, and there's no grass-fed meat available around here from locally produced animals. Recently at the co-op, they had I would assume a local rancher with some cuts of meat for sale in there for $40 and $50 a pound. And yeah, I mean, if you can afford that, you're probably just part of the gentrification cycle more than the healing the earth cycle. So we got a major disconnect. We got people literally out on the streets protesting a butchering house, a slaughterhouse, okay, and taking food out of people's mouths because they're concerned with their property values. Wow, we're on a fast track to major gentrification. We've got this whole idea about overpopulation, which, to say something about that, The thing about this entire concept is that it's based on the idea of a set carrying capacity, that the earth can only handle so many people, or how many people can the earth handle. And all of that is just utter nonsense, because if you understand regeneration to any degree whatsoever, one of the very first things that you'll see is that this is a massively fluctuating number that has to do with how we are interacting with environments. That currently in New Mexico, for example, if we stopped all import of foods, if there wasn't any food coming in from outside of New Mexico can't handle even 1/10 of the people that are here, because we don't have much food production going on. And as I was just discussing, we don't have any meat processing plants in New Mexico, really, like almost zero. There's a couple small independent ones, but even down south in Silver City, I know ranchers down there, and they got to have their meat processed somewhere else, Texas or Arizona. Up here, Kansas, I mean, it's all outsourced to other areas. And that was one of the most critical pieces of all early American communities, is that you'd have not even just local butcher houses and the milk delivery man, but also a local walk-in coolers, local meat hanging facility that's available to the community, stuff like that. The infrastructure is absolutely not present. Okay, so we got to step back. All right, we got to step back and think about what is actually necessary to make some of this stuff happen. And one of the aspects is standing up against this vegan dogma that all animals are bad. You shouldn't eat animals. You shouldn't, because it's just absolutely foolish. And at this point, a part of it, again, to tying in with the overpopulation situation, the idea of that, a large portion of that actually comes out of an anti-human agenda. And this is, the idea that humans are bad for the environment, and that if all humans were removed from the earth would just magically heal. And that is an erroneous, fictitious belief that it doesn't serve the health of the earth one bit, because we are 100% a part of the living systems of the world. And it is absolutely critical that we move towards management that builds resiliency and diversity in the health of ecosystems, and not have this fallacious belief that we should just be removed from the equation and the earth will magically heal. That is a very dangerous belief. And to finish this talk out, what I have to say is that, of course, there are major influences at play that would like to see the earth depopulated. And this is largely comes out of the super wealthy people in power class, however you want to define that, okay, which is nothing new. These rich bankers and the super rich and wealthy, yeah, check out their ideologies around how they view overpopulation and what should be done about it. Well, it's no secret that many of these rich and powerful people would like to see the populations of the earth drastically reduced. That is their agenda. So yeah, I mean, we'll do another one again about this whole capitalism versus socialism and communism. But the thing to touch on it is that some of these super rich and powerful people, in fact, the whole club of Rome, they don't care about ideologies. They care about maintaining power. And they will manipulate the ideologies to get people to work against each other instead of with each other and for the environment. Which, back to the beginning, this is actually what holistic management is that we come together in groups and identify our shared common values. And that is the absolute last thing that the rich and powerful want you to do. They want you to stay isolated, stay stuck in your digital world, and then believe these narratives that are going to lead you to hate each other and to fight against each other. The rich and powerful could want nothing more than that. So please don't buy into the hype about left and right and this and that. Capitalism is the problem, blah, blah, blah. If we can't come together with different types of people. People that, you don't have to like each other and be best friends. You just have to be able to talk to each other sometimes and form a group that's based on an intention, a holistic goal. So, hey, I hope any of this has been useful for you. The work of Allan Savory is very important, and I hope other people will actually write more books that kind of boil it down to these key aspects of, kind of separating out the management system from the cattle themselves, because nowadays we got folks like Carrillo and Alan Williams, Greg Judy, White Oak Pastures. We got many people that can teach you exactly how to use the ruminant animals effectively, use them as herds. But we have a real lack of people that understand that holistic management system. So I'm a big advocate for it, and I hope that you check it out. Thanks for listening, everyone. Hope you're well today. Please like, share, and subscribe.